The regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners of January 17, 2017 will now come to order. We'll begin with an invocation by Pastor Benny Ryan from the New Mount Sinai Baptist Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Susan Adams.
Dear Lord, first of all, we want to say thank you. We are in your presence and we acknowledge you as being the only wise and true God, that you know of all things. And dear Lord, you let us know this morning how much you provide because you allowed us to arrive here safely. You kept us from danger and harm. And as we look to you right now, we realize how insignificant we are. We need you, our Redeemer, our Maker, our Keeper. We need you right now. You are the Alpha and the Omega. Lord, you know exactly what will go on this day before we even begin. And we need your help. We need your wisdom. We need your guidance. We need you, dear Lord, in order to have a day that will be full of peace, full of wisdom and understanding. And at the end of the day, by your blessing, we'll be able to say, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
Please join me in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all.
Y'all. Sound like us now.
You all. Wesley's gone.
You're all.
Wesley has left the dais. Somebody's got to pick up the y'alls.
Y'alls are important.
With that, well, you can have that. Well, thank you, Commissioner. With that, we'll have any additions, deletions to the agenda, any emergency items? Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see if I could move my item 14E1 to match up with Phyllis Fry's 10B1. I think it'll only take a few minutes, but we can wrap them both up at the same time with her short presentation.
With that, do you have any additional backup with that, or where we have Phyllis Fry's backup?
It would be the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move agenda as amended.
Anything further?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously by Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner O'Brien. Next item on the agenda is the proclamations and presentations. A presentation of the Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged 2016 Urban Community Transportation Coordinator of the Year, recognizing the Senior Resources Association operating as Indian River County Community Transportation Coordinator. Good morning, Ms.
Good
Deegan.
morning. I wanted to
Morning all.
say thank you and for allowing us to be in front of you. The award is very important to us for this community. There's a lot of individuals who participate in the transportation system, and this state award, which by the way we have received for the second time in 5 years, allows us to present ourselves as one of the best practice transit systems in the state of Florida. And I'd like to take this time to provide a little bit of an update about our transit systems. We do have two transit systems in Indian River County, Go Line and Community Coach. We have 78 employees, including drivers, management, office staff, and mechanics. Our current year budget is $4.4 million. The Go Line, which is our fixed route system, has 15 routes that run in Indian River County, and it does offer services down to St. Lucie County as well to the Indian River State College. There are 43 Go Line drivers. It is a no-fare system, and we are the only no-fare system in the state of Florida. Go Line, last year Go Line did 1.16 million passenger trips, and we are on track to increase that ridership by a minimum of 2% this year, while most systems in the state of Florida are decreasing. The hours of operations have increased. We are running 6 days a week for Go Line. Our weekday hours are 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. On Sundays, we are now running 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., which is a 3-hour increase for all routes on that day. Our main transit hub is on schedule and will be opening the end of March of this year, and that will provide a building, covered walkways, restrooms, vending machines, vehicle parking area, bike racks, charging stations for mobile equipment, video, and audio surveillance. The Go Line system likes to partner with the community. This year, the supervisors of election and staff and volunteers riding the Go Line, they rode the Go Line to promote voter registration. The Community Health Needs Assessment Cancer Committee will be promoting cancer awareness by having volunteers riding our Go Line buses on April 7th to promote a cancer prevention screening program. And one of my favorites is taking one of our larger Gillig buses to the elementary schools to allow the students to experience getting on a public transit bus. They especially like pulling that stop cord and hearing it ding. I'd also like to recognize Vero Beach Hotel and Spa, who for 2 years contributed financially for the local match funding of Route 16 Beachside Circulator. This route was initiated to help alleviate parking issues on Ocean Drive. Unfortunately, this effort did not work, and our trips were less than our standards. I strongly believe that we should not continue to operate a failing route using taxpayer dollars. Therefore, we have decided to eliminate that route as of January 29th of this year. Our community coach door-to-door, or demand response system, we did 42,000 trips in this past year. We have 20 drivers who are specially trained to transport and assist passengers with disabilities. Last year, we expanded the community coach hours, and we are now running 7 days a week. Community coach is now transporting across county lines. We have no walls here. We responded to requests from residents in South Brevard County who come to Indian River County for programs and services. We have an agreement with Space Coast Area Transit System, allowing community coach to transport Brevard residents into Indian River County for those services. Community Coach also partnered with the American Cancer Society to help them fulfill their transportation program needs for clients going to chemotherapy treatments. All drivers have ongoing operational and safety training throughout the year. In addition, all drivers receive specialty training such as CPR, accident incident training, and thanks to the Sheriff's Office, terrorism response training. Customer care agents are in our office. They are our support staff and include 6 dispatch and customer care agents. They answer calls from the community addressing questions, concerns, and the scheduling of door-to-door trips. These 6 agents received 38,734 phone calls during the calendar year in 2016. That's an average of 32,000 calls per month. Our fleet is comprised of 65 buses and support vehicles. Most of our repairs are done on site by our 3 mechanics. The only work needing to be outsourced are engine and transmission overhauls. I'd like now to introduce a few important people in our transit system. First, Chris Stevenson is the Transportation Mobility Management Director. Chris has been an intricate part of raising the overall quality of service provided by this transit system to the level of being considered a best practice transit system in the state of Florida. In addition, George Colin, Safety and Training Supervisor. Grace Solomey, our Paratransit Supervisor. And Laura Spokas, Operations Assistant. And now it's my pleasure to introduce 2 of our drivers. First, Rosemary Miller. Rosemary, step up. Rosemary has been with us since 1998. That's 19 years. She's our most tenured community coach driver. She has driven over 1.8 million miles with no claimable accidents. We're very proud of her. And Richard Houston, Richard has been with us since 2008. He is our most tenured Go Line driver, and he has driven over 1,044,000 miles with no claimable accidents. Some of the comments that we... Some of the comments that we've heard about these two individuals is that they're responsible, has a great work ethic, always goes above and beyond her passengers or coworkers, consistently volunteers for special events, consistently shows up to work on time, loyal to the company, and most importantly, always ensures the passengers have a safe ride with great customer service. The award presented to SRA by the Florida Commission for Transportation Disadvantage, the 2016 Urban Community Transportation Coordinator of the Year, happened not because of the top-down administration, but because of employees like Rosemary and Richard and everyone else who stands in front of us, who give their dedication and loyalty to providing the best customer service and safety standards to their job in our community. Each day, they transport individuals going to medical appointments, to work, school, after-school programs, shopping, to meet friends, and so many other reasons. These individuals may be disabled in wheelchairs, they may have no other means of transportation, or just using our system by choice. I'm extremely proud to be part of this program, and I'd like to thank the Commission, the county staff, Phil and Brian, the TDLCB committee, and the community for their continued support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stiegel. Does anybody have anything to?
I want to just compliment one thing specifically on the drivers. When you have to negotiate the right turn north at State Road 60 and 27th Avenue and not hit the curb bumpers, that's an art. And especially when you're in the left turn, your first number one in the left turn lane to turn left and go east, and you see how they don't hit you and they don't hit the curb, and they take, especially the big Gillick bus. I'm sure you're looking forward to making that easy right turn in on 17th Street to the new site. Now, it may have other challenges, but not as difficult as that one
Hopefully
is there.
not.
So, a great job, especially on your number of miles driven in the county, and the others. And when is the next hamburger thank you barbecue out there?
Coming up. We'll let you know.
Okay, great. Thank you again, all of you, very much.
Commissioner Solari.
I'd like to thank the whole Goal Line and Community Coach. I think it's one of the gems of Indian River County. When you, not only did you actually go over 1 million miles with no accidents, which is something I'll never do in my lifetime, but you do it in such a cost-effective manner so that we have the best mass transit system in the state of Florida. And about a month ago, I was talking with a regional director from the Central Coast Regional Planning Council, and they had just given an update on the Go Line and other mass transit. And it is actually embarrassing when you compare our county with other counties. You guys are so good. So I thank you for that. And again, it's a wonderful thing to be a commissioner when there's such a great organization doing such good things as yours. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Stiegel, thank you for bringing the reason to the commission. These are faces that we don't see, we hear. Although, Richard, I have to say that I rode your bus, and it was an extreme pleasure. I know you didn't know it was a while back, and I was maybe wearing a baseball cap and sneakers and jeans, but
Undercover boss.
you belong there, okay? You're extremely courteous. Rosemary, I have not had the occasion yet, but we may. I really mean it sincerely. Thank you for bringing the reason why you've gotten the award, and I believe the award will be forthcoming once again with this team. They're extremely responsive on the phone, and whenever we've spoke about anything that might be a citizen concern, whether warranted or not, it is a citizen's concern, and you treat them all the same. And you get your staff involved, and you find out what has to be done to ensure that it's no longer a citizen's concern. That's what makes the system great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. All right. Next item on the agenda is the quarterly update of our recycling efforts, which will be presented by our entire recycling team. Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so for the record, Stephanie Fonville, Recycling Coordinator for the Solid Waste Disposal District. It is that time of year again. We are ready for our quarterly recycling update. We've just finished our first quarter of our second year of single stream recycling. And I'm very happy to say that the recycling tonnages have gone up a little bit. So in October, we've actually seen a 20% increase, about a 21% increase in our recycling tonnages this year compared to last year in single stream recycling. In November, that went up to 42% increase, which is really great. And in December, we usually have a lot more recycling and garbage tonnages in December just because of the holidays. So it was a little bit lower this year than it was last year, but we still got a lot of recycling. It was over 1,700 tons of recycling. So really excited to see that these numbers overall are still going up. So just wanted to take a second to say thank you to all the residents of Indian River County, all the organizations and all the businesses that are taking advantage of our recycling program. It's much more convenient, much easier now, and it's just exciting to see those numbers are still going up. So as a county, when it comes to recycling, we really do want to set a good example. As you know, the Intergenerational Recreation Center opened up this summer, and we've always had recycling available there, but we've partnered with Waste Management and the Recreation Department to really make that program better, more robust, and more visible. So the county staff, the Recreation Department of SWID has gotten together to pick out some aesthetically pleasing recycling containers, and Waste Management has generously offered to pay for all of those recycling containers. So now we will have recycling containers that are matching, that are visually appealing and match all of the garbage containers. We have them in all the lobbies, in all the conference rooms, and in all the outdoor locations. So we just got those indoor recycling containers last week. They are up, and we should be getting the outdoor containers very shortly. So we're really bringing recycling to that facility. When you go in there, you will really see recycling at that generational facility. So we're excited about that. And of course, we have our residential recycling events that we have each year. The next one that's coming up is our electronics and household hazardous waste event that's coming up this Saturday. We will be at the North County Pool from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. This is a co-hosted effort between the Solid Waste Disposal District and Waste Management. SWID has been coordinating the event, made all the advertising, and is going to be covering the cost of the electronic disposal. Waste Management is covering all the costs for advertising, all the costs for the household hazardous waste disposal, and they're offering all of their volunteers to help us with traffic flow and things on the day of. So this is actually a clip that's playing on the government channel right now. And we do have audio, which we're playing.
Residents of Indian River County, join the Solid Waste Disposal District and Waste Management for our residential electronics and household hazardous waste recycling event. This Saturday, from 9 a.m. to noon, we will be in the North County Pool parking lot off of County Road 512, collecting old electronics, chemical cleaners, oil filters, and more. There is no charge, and all materials will be safely recycled. Enjoy free giveaways and a chance to win a laptop.
Visit us at IRCRecycles.com. Indian River County. Roll with us, recycle.
So we're still using our little jingle, which is great. So that's going to be on all the radio stations this week as well. So hopefully everybody will hear about it, and please come out and join us. That should be a fun time. I will be there. We will be raffling off a free laptop that was generously donated by NWI Recycling, which is our e-waste recycling company.
So, Stephanie, this would be a good time for our northern commissioners to mention that people can load up their car to take their stuff to the waste and then go on to the Sebastian Fine Art and Music Festival going on. And when they've picked up all the art they need, they can just swing over to Fellsmere for the Frog Leg Festival. So
Yes,
a lot of good
Frog Leg.
reasons to go north this coming
One-stop
weekend.
shopping for all of your
You can make a
entertainment
whole
and
day out
recycling
of it.
needs.
Start with the recycling, end with the food.
Absolutely,
Bring it up.
absolutely. So it actually worked out very, very well. We will have one in the south part of the county in the summertime, but this actually worked out really well. As you said, there's a lot of things going in North County, so come on out and visit all of us. Some good things. And of course,
I'll look after you all, don't worry.
No, thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Are
And
you,
actually, I'm bringing family up from Fort Lauderdale for the weekend, so we will be there.
you might want to look into goal line.
Well, we
There
could.
you go.
I don't
Bring the
know.
whole crowd up.
I don't know if I want to suffer the goal line of the nephews coming up. but-
Please go ahead.
That is fine. It's just we'll all be there, so come on down. It'll be great. We do have our continued recycling outreach. We have another event coming up in April, the paper shredding event. It'll be very similar to the one that we had in the fall. We're hosting it at Southeast Secure Shredding's local shredding facility off of US 1. It'll again be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and we'll be taking up to 3 boxes of paper to be shredded and recycled for free. So please come out and join us for that. We have been very busy with giving presentations and doing landfill tours. I've gone and visited families. I've visited a Vero Beach High School, I've talked to toddlers all the way up to teenagers, and also I've even gone and talked to retired nurses and retired teachers. So if you are interested in learning anything about recycling, I am still available to come and talk to you. And it's always been very, very fun. We have a couple more landfill tours hopefully coming up before our baby is due in February. So a couple more landfill tours to go. Our ongoing recycling education, we have things out in the community. Right now, we have a poster at the AMC Theater where we had a holiday recycling message. We've kind of updated that and just done more of a general message to tell you how to recycle in those blue carts. One thing that we're very excited about, we have a 30-second video ad that we've just finished making. We have all the video for, and that will be going onto Comcast Cable in February. So that is on the very tail end of being all done. We're really excited about that. And we've worked with some, we have our print and our radio advertisements for our events, but we also have some ongoing things with Vero Voice. We have ads coming out in their magazines and also on their radio and on their social media as well. So we're really trying to keep the word out there and keep our recycling message going. So we're excited about all the things that are going on, and if you have any questions, I am always here.
Commissioners,
Yeah.
other than that,
Just one, Himanshu, could you put up the first slide that had the bar charts on it? Comparing the, so Stephanie, I guess a year ago, October, November, we were still just kind of rolling out the carts, and not everybody had their cart during those months yet, so probably still accounts for the big difference there. But I would guess by December, you know, we kind of started to get the carts out there and get saturated. So I'm just kind of guessing those are probably the numbers we're going to see going forward. It'll be more comparable to last year's numbers.
They should be comparable. We're hoping that they'll be a little bit higher as well, because we have heard that a lot of the garbage companies have been signing up businesses for recycling, so we are hoping that those will be higher. So I'm kind of hoping that October and November reflect that a little bit, and that we'll continue to see the recycling numbers be higher. Do you have anything to add, Mike?
All right, very good, thank you.
Commissioner, the only thing I was going to add is, you know, when we were back in dual stream, it was difficult to even get 1,000 tons a month. So the single stream program, as looking at the newer numbers, we're always going to, you know, be creeping up a little bit. But right now, it's pretty exciting to see the numbers way higher than what we were a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And are these numbers netted out to where we back out the contamination that goes in, or are these gross numbers that we just?
These are gross numbers.
These are gross numbers, okay. Thank you.
Yeah?
anything further?
All right.
I just wanted to ask about the recycling effort. I know beachside, at the beach outlets, we've had growing concern about recycling. And are we looking forward to getting some containers there? I know that we talked about the turtle tubes and the plastic bags, but now that people are utilizing them, they're leaving plastic bags there for recycling. And I was wondering if we were going to start the process for containerization.
We are hoping to. We actually have started having conversations about that. We've gone to all the beach parks and tried to see, you know, how many recycling containers would we need, and we've started working on a program for that. So we don't have them out there yet, but that is something that we are talking about, is in the works. So hoping
I know I just can't stop at the Wabasso Beach facility without hearing about it. It is a growing concern, and there are people actually taking their recyclables and depositing them and then bringing them back home. So it would probably be a tremendous benefit for the recreating community.
Yes, well, I'm really happy to hear that they're interested in that, and I've heard a couple of things about recycling on the beaches as well. So that is something we are looking at and that we're excited about. So
Well,
it's
and
coming.
I don't know if Commissioner O'Brien is stockpiling electronics. You will be bringing electronics up north?
We do have an old printer.
Okay, and well, I have some as well, and I hope that each of us will be seeing all of us on Saturday to help the cause for electronics recycling. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is the approval of the regular meeting of December 13th, 2016.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Zorc. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Informational items. Commissioners, I did want to pull item 7B, which is the next Wabasso community meeting for the Wabasso Corridor Plan update. And it's been scheduled for February 6th, 2017 at 6 p.m. at the Allen Chapel AME Church, located in Wabasso at 6245 85th Street. That's the southwest corner of County Road 510 and 64th Avenue. We've had a series of meetings, and we're going to continue the series of meetings, and I think it's progressing in the visioning of the 510 corridor. So once again, February 6th at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to have item 7D, a little bit more discussion on that. I'd like to ask Phil Mattson and Karen Deagle. This is the Go Line Beachside route, and Karen mentioned it briefly in her remarks, but this was something that I think Karen and the Go Line and Phil deserve a lot of credit for trying to come up with a solution to a big problem with the parking down on the ocean side. And I guess the bottom line is we just didn't get the ridership we were looking for. Is that kind of?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, it wasn't for lack of trying. We did some publicity, we did some promotional things. I know I have a colorful brochure here, showed the route, extolled all the reasons you should take it. Sometimes the routes are very well supported. In fact, most of ours are. In other cases, there are other options that people have, and they choose those other options.
Yeah. And then also, I guess, heating companies, Vero Hotel and Spa, they kicked in some of their own money to help pay for this route. And so I just want to, I guess, commend all of you for the efforts you put to try to find a solution. And I guess, unfortunately, sometimes the best course of action is drop back and punt. So I hope we can still keep this in the back burner somewhere. And if things change or we can see, a shift that might be able to bring it back, where, we don't kill it completely, but just kind of back burner it for now.
We're looking at alternatives too, and to Karen's credit, and part of the reason she was recognized by the state, they even tried restructuring it. Hey, we're not getting much ridership at this point. Let's try to tinker with it a little bit, put it in a more productive potential area. I don't think we'll ever stop. We'll keep looking, and we'll certainly keep this on the back burner.
Okay, great. Well, I think it was a great effort, so I just want to thank you all for that, and Heaton Properties for trying to find a solution to that problem. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Oh, Karen and Phil, there was one other element as you look through, and this was a great concept, and there was some other extenuating circumstances that played a role on it. But if an employer says, ride the bus to work, that employer now becomes a liability and under workman's comp once they're reported to their transportation location. Kind of moves the workday around a little bit, even though it's more convenient. So in the discussions with that, I had heard, not from Mr. Heaton, but just from some other people within the community from the insurance world, that if you instruct your employee to ride a particular type of transportation, they're actually going on the clock as soon as they step on the bus, and all the liabilities and workman's comp elements come along at that earlier point in time. And I don't know how to bridge that, other than if you made parking at the workplace $20 a day, the employee would then, on their own initiative versus being told by an employer, to ride the bus. But if they instruct them to ride it, it changes their work hour starts a half an hour earlier because they're technically reporting for work because the employer's telling them to ride that mode of transportation.
That's
so
interesting.
I don't know how you work through that, but I could see where that would be. That's a liability area that the employer picks up that maybe some of them, after they realize that they couldn't tell them to ride the bus, they could suggest it, but they couldn't say, hey, park over there and ride that mode of transportation to work.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's carrots and sticks. I mean, you can say parking is limited, tickets are going to be written, there's enforcement, use this bus, use this alternative, but you can't exactly mandate it because then you're putting them on the clock a little earlier and shifting liability, so.
But
Pretty
great,
difficult.
and thank the heating companies for their sponsorship. I mean, it was, it could have turned out differently, but
Yeah.
the ridership numbers are what they are, and we have to be responsible with the tax dollars.
They were great partners, and I have to say that when we negotiated the elimination of this route, they did request that they would be given first right of refusal if we ever did it again. So we do have a good community partner still. They really appreciated being a partner to it, so good relations.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything further on? If not, we'll continue on with the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioners, yes.
staff would request that we pull item 8F for some discussion and minor modification.
8F.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item C and E.
Item C, Charlie, E, Echo. Okay. Anything further from the board? Is there any member of the public that would like anything pulled for further discussion, other than those items? Seeing none,
Move
Commissioners?
approval as amended.
Second. That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously as amended. The first item that was pulled, item 8C, Charlie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is miscellaneous budget amendment, and just want to bring to the board's attention item 5, which is where the county applied. In this case, it was a FEMA Assistance Firefighters Grant for some new breathing apparatuses and such. And there's a lot of these grants out there, and I'd just like to kind of bring it to everybody's attention that we can apply for. I don't think we've been doing a good job of going after some of these grants. And because of the size of our county, a lot of these grants only require a 10% match, and so it's a 90% grant. So I just want to bring that out, just let staff know that I think we ought to be going after a lot more of these things and to support the fire fighting district, and at no great cost to the county. It's a fairly good 90-10 split, so I just kind of want to bring that out.
I think that's an excellent point. We have applied for a number of these in the past. Sometimes we get funded, sometimes we don't. We are looking at an upcoming application as relates to Station 14 funding for a SAFER grant.
Good, great, okay, thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, move approval of item 8C.
Second.
And that's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Adams. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item E, 8 Echo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an award of a bid for 43rd Avenue sidewalk improvements, and the low bidder was Tim Rose Contracting. I know Tim usually does a really good job for us and stuff, but I think with Mr. Rose, sometimes it's kind of either a feast or famine with him, and if he gets a lot of bids all at once, then the whole process starts getting slowed down. So just want to ask Rich Spirica just if he's aware if Mr. Rose is not fully extended yet, or I just want to make sure this thing doesn't get delayed out unnecessarily.
Rich Spirica, Public Works Director. At this point, I don't believe that Tim is fully extended. He's finishing up. He has 3 projects for the county. Right now he has Old Dixie, which is wrapping up. We're doing final punch list right now. The second project is the 8th Street sidewalk, 8th Street and 43rd. He's working on that one now, and then this would be the third one. As far as my understanding is Tim doesn't have a whole lot of other work out there, so I don't believe that at this time that he would be fully extending himself. He did provide us in a pre-construction meeting before that he was hiring extra people to do the sidewalk projects, including this one, because this one had bid and he was the apparent low bidder at that time. I feel comfortable with Tim Rose Contracting doing this project.
Okay, that's all I needed to hear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move staff recommendation for item 8E.
On motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Adams. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And item 8F Foxtrot was pulled by our county administrator.
Yes, thank you very much. Just really briefly, we received email correspondence from the town. They just had a small suggested change to the agreement, essentially clarifying that the owner will be the county in the agreement, thus that the licensee will be providing specific information about insurance to the owner. That'll be changed to insurance will be provided to the county. See no problem with those changes and just recommend that the board approve it subject to those changes.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
And that's a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Zork. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That concludes the consent agenda. And next will be the constitutional offices. Is the Indian River County Sheriff requesting funding of $80,821.45. And that's a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Adams.
Mr. Chairman. Do you have one question for the sheriff on this? Sheriff, in your backup here, you're listing that part of the money will be used to purchase tactical assault vests for corrections officers. Can you explain why your corrections officers need assault vests?
Certainly, the term assault may be a tad alarming. However, as you're aware, they are posted throughout the county during hurricanes, most recently during Hurricane Matthew, at all of the, where do we go? With the, not the intersections, the special needs shelters and all of the shelters. Those are also staffed by corrections deputies. I think the description may be a little more sensitive than it actually is, but essentially it's bulletproof vest.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anybody from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Sheriff. Next item on the agenda is the Indian River County Sheriff requesting authorization for proceeds from the auction of surplus property in the amount of $105,174 to be used in the current fiscal year for purchase of like-kind property.
Move approval.
Second.
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Solari. Any further discussion on the board? Anybody from the audience? Great
Thank you,
presentation, Sheriff. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda is public discussion items. Is a request to speak from Phyllis Fry, the American Coalition for Property Rights, regarding HUD's affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. Good morning, Ms. Fry.
Good morning, sir, and good morning, commissioners, staff, and members of the public. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today with an update on the Department of Housing and Urban Development's affirmatively furthering fair housing rule, and I do reside at 275 Date Palm Road in Vero Beach, Florida. Our public records show, and by the way, I just want to say that I did address this item, as most of you may recall, in April of 2016. So this is an update and review for your benefit as well. Commissioner Adams, and by the way, congratulations on your election. It's nice to see you. Our public records show that Indian River County accepts HUD grants that provide low-income housing. Clearly, these grants are a necessary good and provide benefits for our veterans, the homeless, and the poor, filling a very important need. We also apply for many other kinds of grants for infrastructure, roads, and public works. But in 2015, certain grants now contain the new AFFH rule. What this means to you is that if your metropolitan planning organization or your city mayor or organizations such as the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council or any applicant that accepts community development block grants, home investment partnerships, emergency solution grants, housing opportunities for people with AIDS, challenge grants, or others that contain the AFFH rule, you must comply with the mandates that require you to relinquish local planning and zoning and land use rights. In other words, home rule of law. If you accept AFFH, you no longer have a say in the future development of your community. I've provided you with documentation that explains your legal obligations, and I've given you each an expanded package of those documents so that you can fully understand the impact of AFFH on local decision-making. But it boils down to one statement, basically, that says, quote, your jurisdiction agrees to take no action materially inconsistent with its obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. HUD will assist recipient to adjust their land use and zoning laws to meet the legal obligations of AFFH, end quote. Using the AFFH rule, HUD emphasizes that recipients must use HUD's data tables and jurisdictions. These parameters force your county and its residents to join a region, whether you want to or not. This annexes your community to adjoining counties, placing the rights of the region above the preference of local citizens, including their voting rights. Decision-making and community development is taken out of the hands of local residents, elected officials, and state representatives, and is placed in the hands of the federal government. Case histories shown in the documents that I've provided that when grant recipients fail to comply with HUD's AFFH rule, HUD will respond with a compliance review, followed by a lawsuit by the Department of Justice, and you will be forced into compliance. Statistics show a growing list of U.S. cities and counties that are being sued and forced to comply with the AFFH rule. Westchester County, New York was the landmark case for HUD's overreach, but the list includes many others forced to relinquish their rights, threatened by the more severe AFFH rule. However, there are an increasing number of cities and counties that have become educated about the consequences of AFFH. In your documents, you will learn how elected officials in these locales have protected their communities through a single policy change. As one example, the elected officials of Sedgwick County, Kansas created a grant application and award policy, followed by an amendment that reads as follows, quote, whereas upon review it has been determined that it is desirable that this policy should be amended to better serve current needs, which include not entering into grant agreements that require an assessment of fair housing, pursuant to the federal regulations contained within the AFFH Fair Housing Rule. The revised grant application and award policy is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference, and it is hereby adopted and shall be incorporated in the Sedgwick County Policies and Procedures Manual, replacing earlier versions of said policy. End quote. As this policy change reveals, Sedgwick County has protected home rule of law by stating it will not accept any funding or assistance, whether directly through the federal government or pass through funding from the state, that requires an assessment of AFFH as per HUD programs. The next Secretary of HUD, Dr. Ben Carson, agrees that the AFFH rule is federal overreach. It does little to help the poor, but instead gives the federal government powers that usurp home rule. My proposed policy changes to eliminate the AFFH rule are supported by Senate Member Mike Lee with Senate Bill 1909 and House Member Paul Gosser with House Bill 1995. I will be presenting our state legislators with a template for a bill to do the same, but these measures, while important, take time. That is why I'm calling for more immediate action today with a proposal to create written changes to our own policies within the county that state our refusal to accept any grants that contain the AFFH rule. This is the only recourse we have for protection. We know that HUD is moving quickly and furtively to implement AFFH using sub rosa regulatory powers. Without our own protective policy, we are vulnerable to their mandates. The county has the means and the obligation, and I think the opportunity, to stop the loss of home rule. If you move to further discussion, policy details you might want to consider would cover contingencies for the fact that HUD officials often change their AFFH name and rename programs in an attempt to conceal the fact that AFFH is embedded in their grants. Consider also that individuals and agencies outside our locally elected bodies, such as regional planning councils, can apply for grants that affect us without going to our commissioners. Policy change could be drafted to cover this. Our attorney might also include wording that would give our citizens more time to review the grants and provide for contingencies should future commissioners try to reverse the policy. In my outline, I hope I've provided sufficient information for further discussion and that you will ultimately take action to make policy changes that will protect us from the AFFH rule and preserve home rule of law while at the same time continuing to provide affordable housing. We ask you to consider this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and kind of blending my item into Phyllis's, and I will apologize. I do have a copy of the April presentation that Phyllis had made in length that was part of the April packet. And between her item and my item, we didn't want to duplicate it, and somehow we inadvertently didn't get attached to either one of those. So I'll pass this copy down to the clerk, but it goes back through the April items with a January cover letter to myself. I'll pass it down to the clerk. So I wanted to see, is there any consensus from the board to look at two policy changes? One, initially, when we're looking at grant applications, to have staff flag if they see any of the AFFH designation or the name substitutions. We know how that's worked in the past. Lipstick on a pig, it's still what it is. They just changed the name on it, so we'll have to figure out how to keep track of the names. Secondly, is if there's consensus of the board to have the county attorney look at the Kansas proposal that was mentioned of what they have. We obviously don't want to close the door on the items that provide the needs and services for the residents of our community, but we need to be keenly aware if we're accepting funds that will then have other unintended consequences and strings attached, that we would know kind of what we're getting into when we apply for these grant processes. So I'd like to see if there's any comments or thoughts from the other commissioners, or another way to propose this other than a staff checklist to look at if we're applying for a grant. Did we screen through to see if we're going into the AFFH realm? And then secondly, for the county attorney to look at the Kansas proposal and bring something back to us with either his comments, suggestions, recommendations, or an alternative method to achieve the same goal.
Well, before we go on that track, I would like our fellow commissioners to
pass that down for the
respond to Phyllis Fry's presentation, and I did have a couple of questions for our staff as well, if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
Well, thank you. Commissioner Solari.
I'd like to thank Phyllis very much for her presentation. I think it's very well done, and if you actually read through all the backup information she's given us, it's a clear indication of not what necessarily will happen, but what very well may happen, and which has already happened in a number of communities. I think that my understanding is our staff should be, the community development, looking at all these grants, but I think if we wanted to formalize the process and put it into our actual policy, I think that would be a fine thing. I think all these grants, not only should community development look at them, that they should be scrutinized by the legal department, separate from your other issue for the attorney, which I would certainly support. I think that protection of home rule is vitally important, and I think that the federal government is threatening it all the time. And I find it very problematic that HUD would reach into our community and want to change its planning and zoning rules and regulations, which it has tried to do and actually successfully done in some areas. I think that we have to keep in mind that HUD is not, while HUD does and has a lot of programs which are very good, like a lot of bureaucracies, it's not a fully benign organization. And we ought to, I think, when we talk about HUD, keep in mind a little bit about the scale and scope of HUD. I asked somebody what he thought HUD's budget was yesterday, and he estimated $1 billion. No, HUD's budget is over $47 billion this year. So if they take a tack different from ours, they have the resources to fight it. I mean, we understand what type of fight we've had with different bureaucracies in this county. Actually, are under the information items, we see the budget we have for just fighting two basically bureaucratic fostered events, all aboard Florida and the electric issue. And we've spent now some millions of dollars fighting projects promoted by the Florida Municipal Power Agency, but also the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Florida Development Finance Corporation. And so while a lot of these agencies are necessary and good, they are still problematic. And one of the biggest problems is a lot of these bureaucracies don't fight under the tenets of the rule of law. And one of Ms. Fry's backups shows this very, very well. The federal government has had a lot of things which is done outside the rule of law. We all remember Fast and Furious. They also had Operation Choke Point, which was a Department of Justice initiative that forced banks to withdraw services to politically disfavored businesses, including payday loans, pawn shops, and gun shops. There was no law, no regulation, or even executive order. It was simply a list of targeted companies provided to banks, accompanied by threats of internal reviews for failure to comply with federal guidelines. As Professor Tim Wu, a supporter of these agency tactics, writes in Duke Law Review, quote, "Rule by threats, I argue, is under some circumstances a superior means of regulatory oversight." I find this to be a particularly dangerous idea and concept, but it's one that's been promoted in law reviews, and that there's a certain group of people who actually think that this is the way to go. It's a gross violation of the rule of law. And again, when you're fighting a bureaucracy that has $47 billion budget, which the citizens replenish on an annual basis, it shows you what type of fight we could be up against. So I think that the commissioner's proposals are very mild and warranted in this, and it shouldn't have any downside for us, but could protect us from some very bad thing happening. So I would hope that the entire board would be very supportive of these very, I believe, reasonable suggestions by the commissioner. So I thank Phyllis Fry and I thank Commissioner Zork for bringing these forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I concur with a lot of what's been said, and I think it'd be good to have staff take a good forensic look at how this would impact some of our grants and such. And particularly, I'd like staff to look at them in, you know, the upfront financial costs, that if there are certain grants, if we pass what Commissioner Zork is proposing in his matters, if we pass that policy change, what financial impact will that have to any of our programs that we currently do? And secondly, I guess take a look at what is in the AFFH that is different than what we're doing now. Because, like, I guess with our SHIP program, there has to be a certain percentage of very low-income people, a certain percentage of low-income people, and things like that, which I don't think we've had a problem meeting those requirements, and those guidelines are out there for that program. So I'd just be interested to see if there's things in the AFFH that are more extreme than that, you know, or you know, staff comes back and says, yeah, there's no way we would meet that with what we've got now, so we should avoid it. Or would staff say, no, we meet all those criteria now, and we don't see any change going forward. Just want to make sure we don't throw the baby out with any bathwater, but certainly would like to have staff look at this in greater detail and come back to us and flesh it all out thoroughly. But you know, if it does have a negative impact, then certainly we need to avoid it. So, but I just want to make sure staff takes a good hard look at it, both from a financial aspect and also what the real requirements are. So.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien, and I concur as well. I do have some concerns. I think this discussion came about early on. There is an odor of 750 thought process happening. I believe that our good friends in the state of New York who engaged in some commitment to granting did not look fully at the fine line, and I think that they accepted a check that their banks could not cash, and I believe that it put them in a terrible state. However, I do have some concerns that we're looking at the baby in the bathwater when we're looking at programs like HUD-VASH and our commitment to affordable housing that we have established and discussed and committed to. And I don't want to see any of those programs altered as well. I realize that most of the granting has been closely scrutinized, and we were blessed with having the scrutiny of our staff, inclusive of Joe Baird and Jason Brown. And in discussing it, Jason Brown, well, we have Jason talk about it, but he has reviewed every one of these applications. And we've also had our attorney's office review them, and we have not engaged in those commitments. Just a little concerned that the program known as HUD-VASH, which assists our veterans greatly, and our commitment to affordable housing would be altered. I have great respect for Dr. Ben Carson and his statement saying that this system have some challenges. It's broken in some respect, and it will be addressed. And I do have the faith that that will be changed, so we won't be in that predicament. But by the same token, share the concerns. So I wanted to know from Jason and our attorney that we would not have altered those two plans that we have intact.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So the county, after Mrs. Fry spoke in April, we took a brief look at these grants again. The language in those grants is there, and those do apply to us. The affirmatively fair housing, furthering fair housing rule. We think we're checking the boxes. I will say that some of the rulemaking by HUD and their overreach is troubling, that if we do fall into where we're not checking a box, that there could be some significant consequences. So we understand the concern. We share the concern. We think we're checking that box right now, but we need to make sure that we are continuing to monitor that, and going forward we can implement this policy and make sure that any time a future grant comes up, that we do have a full review of what those commitments are that we would be making if we get into those grants, and the board can make an informed decision on whether to move forward with a grant or not.
If I may,
Counselor.
Commissioner, I just want to clarify something, because I heard two separate things from Commissioner Zork, which were supported by Commissioner Solari, so I just want to understand. The first comment was we'd like staff to sort of help monitor, identify, when one of these issues comes up in one of our grants, which is sort of an identification and notification to the board. The second one was, let's follow and look at maybe drafting something similar to what the Kansas County has done. Now, the Kansas County has done is that they've agreed that they will not apply for or accept any assistance that contains these provisions. So the first one was more of I read or heard as more of an identification and notification policy. The second one was more of a complete prohibition and ban. And I just want to understand from the board, which of those two directions are you looking to go?
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, one I thought we could do initially right away, and the other one might take a little bit more time. So if we have new grants we're applying for in the very near future, we would apply the first criteria to look at till we could fully vet the Kansas type proposal, which if we adopt something that has a longer track to it. So I wanted to get something in place soon to be looking for that specifically, and then but simultaneously reviewing and looking at the Kansas proposal, and bring back your thoughts and comments, or if there's a different approach.
And I assume with the thoughts and comments, a lot of these are going to be more policy based. So do you want us to kind of go through that analysis of, like Commissioner O'Brien was talking about, with the financial ramifications, what are the requirements, and incorporate that in as part of an item to bring back to the board?
Well, Counselor, you read my concerns. I'm concerned about our previous commitments, and as far as our assistance for the veterans, and things that we're looking at and programs. But I wanted to hear from Jason that we have not altered any of those actions, and that has not come up where there was a commitment that we had to forego any granting for going forward for our commitments.
Well, I'd say, unfortunately, I can't guarantee that we don't fall into that. A lot of the grants that we have, this rule does apply to us. We think we're in compliance, but in my discussions with the county attorney's office and staff, we can't be certain that if HUD were to come down, that we would fulfill all of the compliance. We think we're in compliance. It's the consequences, if you're not, are pretty dire. Pretty low chance you're going to get struck by lightning, but we don't go out and play in a thunderstorm. So out of an abundance of caution, we understand the concern here. I would say that we do have several existing grants that apply. Some of those are on a renewal type basis. For instance, the ones that the Homeless Assistance Council, Louise Hubbard's group, gets for us, we may have gotten a grant that was enough for 3 years, 7 years ago, and then those will have renewals. So I view that as a different situation than a brand new CDBG grant or something like that. So we would need to get clarification on, would we grandfather the existing grants that we have, and particularly if there's a renewal. Section 8's another one. We've got old agreements from years ago, but we get new funding each year. So we would need to differentiate, do we do anything about those existing grants, or is that kind of a grandfathered situation? Then any grants moving forward, we would either go one of the two options as Dylan articulated. Either we review and point that out so that the board can make an informed decision before accepting any new grants, or we could have a prohibition on accepting any new grants. I would say that the circumstances may change with the new administration, new HUD secretary coming in. This affirmatively furthering fair housing language initially was in the Fair Housing Act from the 60s, but this new rule came about in 2015. So new administration could change that. If we do decide to not pursue funding, we may put that on review, and if the rule changes and goes away, then perhaps we could continue to monitor that. I will say that may take a couple of years, because in researching this rule that came into effect in 2015, they started working on it in 2013. So it may take a couple of years, even if the new administration replaces this rule, which it seems they may desire to do.
Mr. Chairman, it may be, and the odds are very much against this actually happening. It may be that if the staff does a good review and we keep on working at this, we'll get a set of 3 or 4 proposals we could actually make to HUD and go through Congressman Posey or whoever Congressman may be. The biggest fear for me is that you've got language in here which the bureaucrats can interpret any way they want to, and that is what undermines the rule of law. You can't read this and say what they can or cannot do. I mean, you can read this, and some people have been worried about it, in such a way that we couldn't let Gifford, for instance, continue to be Gifford. That would be a violation of the AFFH. And so it takes not only choices away from us as commissioners, but it takes away choice from residents of our community. So if we can come up with 3 or 4 things that would end the vagueness, get specificity, so we actually knew what we were signing. That, I think, would be something that other communities would be interested in, and if we actually were able to succeed, would be, I think, a major victory for not only local government and local control, but good government in general.
I know we have great staff for review, but if one item is missed, we could be in that slippery slope, and I agree that we need to set forward something. But
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Adams wanted to.
I have a couple comments. One, I think it's important to note that there's two parts of this process. There's the applying for the grant process, and then there's the acceptance and awarding of the grant. So I would assume that, you know, we have a very high level, very intelligent staff in the county, and I assume that they do their due diligence and they read what those grant requirements are and know full well what they're applying for when that is done. Is that correct? I'm assuming that y'all are not going to apply for a grant that's going to put us on the hook for something that would not be in the best interest. Because I know this county is very committed to home rule and keeping our control locally. Secondly, as far as the acceptance process, you know, I would be more in favor of doing something on a case-by-case, grant-by-grant process, bringing that information to us for us to make that decision versus locking into just a preclusion from even looking at other grants. I echo and agree with the concerns of the board, but I just think moving forward with the different changes that are going to be happening at HUD, that might put us in a more difficult position down the road. If those rules change, we'd have to go back and change that process versus doing it on a grant-by-grant situation. So that being said, you know, I know that for some of these grants and some of the areas that which we apply for the grants, particularly infrastructure with those CDBG grants, they're going to be very important moving forward with doing some of those improvement projects that we have on the horizon in the next 5 years. So I think it's our job to make sure that we know what grants we're applying for and the full ramifications of those, and then what the requirements are once we accept the grant and have to perform those projects under that grant. And that's our job and staff's job to bring that and fully understand what we are agreeing to. So I think moving forward, that is going to be very important for us to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Counselor.
Thank you, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl, County Fair Housing Administrator. I just wanted to point out to the board that both the SHIP program and the Housing Choice Venture, the Section 8, are reviewed on an annual basis. We've passed with flying colors. I just wanted to make sure that the board and staff understood that we are in great shape as far as 2 of those programs are concerned. So, thank you.
And to that, Bill, that was what scared me when Jason said, we think we're in compliance, you know, and if there's certain standards that are vague and debatable, that's the really scary thing, because that's kind of like the FEMA de-obligation stuff. You know, they come back and say, you know what, we think you're wrong, and then you're toast. And again, I go back to like the SHIP. To me, those conditions are pretty straightforward. You know, you either make X income or you make this income, so you go in that bucket or this bucket, and you need 30% here and 40 and what have you. So I think those things, yeah, we can check those boxes and make sure that we are in compliance and we have very good subjective data that you can look at for those things. My concern would be if any of these grants where there's more of a vague definitions or requirements that are subject to interpretation, and then that would be really scary, and I think those are things we want to stay away from. But if it's pretty well outlined, you know, you have to have X% and that's defined as this, then I'd feel more comfortable. But I think that's where I would want to look at is, are the conditions of the grant vague or more specific that we can make sure we follow?
Agreed.
Agreed. You know, I'd like to see us be able to continue on to do everything possible for the programs in which we have. There is some pullback, there's some concern of financial obligation, which I believe that staff has done an excellent job. But again, as you state, opinion, that can be debated, and we may lose that argument. And I don't believe that we're in the same position as our colleagues in the northern part of this great nation, but I believe that we do have some concerns. So with that said, is there anybody from the audience that would like to speak regarding this before a motion is made? Thank you. There's two podiums. Okay. All right. Commissioner Zork.
Yes, sir. So do we have, we don't traditionally take votes on these, but I think there's some common census I think that the attorney's office could take and bring back.
Well, Commissioner Zork, you have your matter.
Once
so
you have
certainly
your
make a
matter
motion.
on there, then
Right.
you do have
Ability to make a-
ability to make motion, and we can
Okay.
vote on that.
Okay.
That's the uniqueness of today's item.
Okay.
However, I do share the same concerns that have been expressed, that we might be putting up with your second item that you discussed, that we could be putting up a 20-foot wall and preventing any opportunity. While we know that the federal government might be changing the policy, and yes, albeit it may take 2 years, I believe that we would want to still not place that 20-foot wall. So if you wanted to direct staff to review what we do and come back with an item, not making the motion, but I know that I believe that I read your intent as to, hey, we have to do something, because you know what Phyllis Fry has mentioned is extremely valid, and it's a gentle reminder of our discussion of 750 and all the onerous clawbacks that we could be engaging with, all for a simple grant. So I believe that the first item that you discussed is very valid. The second one, I have some reservation on. Again, on the 20-foot wall, and I believe I heard that from some members of the commission. So I mean, you can make a motion. We can direct staff to review, bring back, or we can make a motion to begin the process of changing policy.
Well, I think I'll stay with very similar to my opening motion, which first is that we, anything that we apply for today going forward, that we really keep doing our due diligence that we have been doing, but a more formal process to say, yes, we've reviewed a checkbox where we're not drifting into the AFFH, as we can see, to give us some guidance on our near-term items. But I would be okay, I would like to then also ask the county attorney's office to bring back a solution that would not preclude or cancel any of the programs that we currently have in place. The Veterans Program, the Section 8, some of the other ones that were mentioned, to bring back a solution, whether it's similar to Kansas or another vehicle that you could identify. If it happens to be bringing an AFFH, I want a 50-foot wall, not a 20-foot. So keeping it to kind of summarizing the motion would be is to do a immediate implementation of a thorough checkbox review of AFFH. Are we going in that direction? And second, to have the county attorney's office bring back something that saves what we have that's not currently an AFFH requirements, but if we do see something that is clearly AFFH, that we would like to specifically avoid it.
Second.
Sounds clear.
Clear.
Madam Clerk? Okay, that's a motion by Commissioner Zork, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. Any further discussion, commissioners? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
On the same issue, I'd like to make another motion if I could.
Certainly.
I would like to have the board direct staff, which would, in my view, in this case, be community development and legal, to, as they go through this process, look at or try to identify the most problematic aspects of AFFH, including its vagueness, where it's particularly vague, those areas where basically we have no idea what they're asking for, and to actually come up with some recommendations for how we would, if we could, change it, so that we can end up with hopefully a reasonably short but meaningful document that we could then take to Congressman Posey and ask him to see if there's anything he could do, and then submit to HUD ourselves, and requesting those changes in their present rules.
I'd like to second that.
And I'd like to ask, because I believe that Ms. Fry has such a wealth of knowledge in there, I'd like her to be invited to be in the loop in this process.
So,
Thank you. So that's the motion. And second, thank you very much.
so do you envision that being like a legal brief on the issues surrounding AFFH and what you would propose or the county would propose those changes to be?
Similar to that, yes.
Sounds like we're creating the nexus for
I think that addresses some of the problems about throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
But allows us to do something proactive that may be meaningful, and at the worst case, it'll give us a better understanding of what the actual issues and risks are.
And we'll have the nexus for a robust resolution that can be forwarded to our federal government.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? That was a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
If I may, that was just a very lengthy motion, so I just want to make sure the clerk's able to capture it all. So I heard in the motion that there was direction to staff and specifically Community Development Department and County Attorney's Office to identify problematic aspects of the rule. This may include vagueness issues, prepare some recommendations on how best to change that rule, and as part of that process, sort of a third prong is to coordinate with Phyllis Frey on where we're going with those recommendations and our review.
That sounded pretty much just what I said and just as long.
It helps if I repeated, I made sure we picked up on all the issues.
That was just fine. Thank you, Counselor. All right, and thank you, Ms. Frey, for your dedication to doing what's right and assisting this board in moving things forward. Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, and thank you, Phyllis, and also our best to Susan, because I know you guys tag team this issue quite a bit, so our thanks go out to both of you, and your husbands who allow you to do this very important work.
And Commissioner Zork, you're forwarding that to the clerk? as
Yes, it
far as
already went.
backup, and so the public knows that Ms. Fry had given each one of us a packet prior to this meeting last week, and we were able to review and have the opportunity, and the clerk also has that as well. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the public notice item. Counselor.
Thank you very much. We have one public notice item. We have a public notice of a public hearing which is scheduled for January 24th. That is to consider codifying the code of Indian River County. This will be legislative in nature, and again, it'll be for January 24th. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Next item on the agenda is item 12G1, which is for utility services, which is the West Wabasso Phase 2 sewer and the East Gifford drainage proposal, bidding status, bid number 2017021. Good morning, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. We're here to talk about the West Wabasso Phase 2 sewer and Gifford drainage project. Just a short history that was in your backup on our agenda item. The board on December 1st of 2015 approved the federally funded sub-grant agreement with the funds for allocation of up to $750,000. And simultaneously, we also were awarded a cost share grant with the St. Johns River Water Management District of up to $344,000. The project was initially advertised on August 28th. We held a mandatory pre-bid meeting. 7 contractors showed up for that meeting, but only 2 contractors bid on September 29th. The bids came in quite high. We presented that information to the board on November 1st of this year, or of last year rather, 2016, And the board authorized staff to reject the 2 bids, to modify the specs to try to look at some cost savings, some value engineering, and to re-advertise based on the initial high price. So the project was rebid for the second time on November 14th, with those bids being received on the 15th. And so we have a little chart on the agenda item, but to briefly walk you through that, our opinion of probable cost for both project areas, the A and the B, A being the sewer, B being the drainage area, is about $1.2 million. The initial bids opened on the 29th of September came in close to $1 million over that. Blue Goose Construction was the low bidder at that time. The board authorized staff to reject those bids. We went out for bid again and received those bids on the 15th. That's shown on the second page. Blue Goose Construction was still the low bidder of $2.26 million. Interesting to note that their sewer project went down about $35,000, but the drainage portion, for some reason, which we didn't do any value engineering on, actually increased about $38,000. So their bid actually went up between the first and second go-around. So as you can see that obviously there's a large disparity between the 2 prices and what we thought the project was going to cost and what the project actually came in at. Staff was trying to at least try to think of reasons why that would be the case. We believe that some of the contractors that bid on this project are in fact busy. I know that some of these contractors do more than just pipe work, utility work. They also do road and bridge work, paving work. And perhaps they were just so busy that they threw a high number out there, hoping to not get the job, but if they did get the job, then certainly it'd be worth their while. So we have some options for the board to consider. Option 1 is to terminate the project, and option 2 is to go forward. So let's look at option number 1. Staff notes that since the bid prices are approximately $1 million over budget on both the initial and the second rebid, then the board would direct staff to terminate the project, and there's a couple things that we would have to do that. In item 13 of the FDEO CDBG grant, there's a termination clause that we would have to exercise, and we would certainly look to go that route. And then with the St. Johns River Water Management District, there's also termination language that we would send notice to the district. The third bullet I just mentioned is to keep in mind that with the Gifford Neighborhood Plan, part of this project was to combine 2 efforts into one, was to accelerate the drainage improvements that would be required as part of Action 11.2 with the funding language of Action 14.5, which talks about doing the drainage improvements in the East Gifford area. Certainly, if this project were to be terminated, we would recommend that staff, Public Works, be looking to do that project at some future time through a separate procurement process. Option 2 is if the board decides that this project is worthwhile and somehow can find the additional funding, then it would award the board would award it to Blue Goose Construction for a total sum of $2,261,528.20. I must say that this has been a long process for a lot of folks. We started this process back in 2012 when Phase 1 was being closed out. We had multiple CATF meetings going back to 2014. We had 2 public hearing meetings within a 6-month time period. We applied for the grant, we scored well, and then went to the board to sign that agreement in December of 2015. And it's just taken this while with the bid process, with the requirements, checking the boxes to make sure that we did have our ducks in a row to be able to have the release of those funds. But certainly there's some time frames that are tied to both these grants. There's a time frame of 24 months from the date of signing for the FDEO project, which would be December 1st, so that time frame would be the end of 2017. And with the district, it's even shorter than that. We're supposed to have this project completed by the summer of 2017. However, there is a provision to extend that if that was an option, if we are to move forward. But certainly, those timeframes don't come into play if the board decides to terminate the project. I did want to say thank you to Julianne and to Teddy. They spent a lot of time going around collecting information for the surveys from those folks that live in this area that are either very low income or low to moderate income. That certainly was a lot of work in a short amount of time. Corbett Allday is here from our Guardian in case there's any questions specifically about the grant process. And certainly we want to thank purchasing for helping us through the 2 procurement processes to try to get to this point today. So staff recommends option 1, which is to obviously terminate both the FDEO agreement and the district agreement. And certainly I'm available for any questions if the board would like to ask any questions.
Thank you, Vinny. Commissioners?
I have a couple of questions. Vinny, when you looked at the the bid comparison, there's a couple things that just kind of jump off the page. Number 11, Type B stabilized subgrade, where you have one contractor, and I don't know why the variations there are. One contractor is at $203,000 for that line item, one's $42,000. There's no way the cost variation to do the same work can be that far apart. That if it'd be nice if there was a third bidder to get a better understanding of this, but there's a few other items where item number 4, the 8-inch PVC gravity line, 12 to 14 feet, one guy's got $57,000, one guy's got $239,000. There's no logic to, one guy's the obvious less by a factor of 4, and then 3 lines down, it's just the opposite, and he's high by a factor of 4. I think
you'll
you're
see that on
opening
the next page with the lift station too.
Right.
I mean, at the lift station's usually about 200,000. You have one that's at 305,000. The other one's more in line with what we would
Right.
have, especially when we have our specifications of what we're asking for. So there is no logic. And I think that some of these folks, again, we're looking to pad the numbers. Obviously, if they get the job, great, and they'll make some money on certain things. But in some of these, we were hoping to actually get some better return, especially when we had 7 folks at the mandatory pre-bid meeting.
Right.
And unfortunately, only 2 bid.
And I know from the prior meeting, one of the things we thought, this was also the same project where we looked at changing so we reduce some of the depth of the project to get the dewatering to a lower amount. And I see we're only down to 2 manholes at the 14 to 16 feet deep, which is better. I think before we had probably 10. It was just a lot deeper before, so that, if you took the low line item from each side, the project's probably $300,000 less than the low bidder, but that's what they bid. And if there was a third, we could get the logic a little better. But I think some of the comments you're making are probably right on it. If I get it at this crazy number, I'll take it. But if not, there's enough other stuff out there to keep me busy. Also, something you don't know about the district's, not the district, but the DEP's proposal for the 50-50 cost share that they're looking at bringing. If we do table this, I know that when I met with Assistant Secretary Drew Bartlett, he wants to hear some of our concepts of if we adopt a similar utility plan that's similar to a DOT 5-year, 10-year goal plan, where we could bring this right back in under the plan he's looking at putting together. And he's going to be scheduling a trip here in the near future to talk with us about what we'd like to do. And this would be a great candidate project for that, other than we've got to either step back and look at the scope of how we wrote it. Is there anything that triggered some of these crazy swings in numbers? And if there's not, if we have that other funding source, look at taking a third swing at it somehow. But I don't know what else we could do to, we reduced the depth, which the dewatering was very expensive on the prior version. But you're right, if the public looks at these numbers, they'll see some of the same things that just jump off the page that you don't get the logic behind it. So if we do table it, I'd say this could be one of our first projects to look at putting into our plan that we would submit back to DEP as they're looking to do the 50-50 cost share, which would bring in additional revenue to buy the cost of the system down to a greater number. So I wouldn't want to completely notify, I don't know how long we could keep the St. John's portion open if we don't award today. Do you know how long we could keep that money?
We're supposed to have that project completed by June of this year.
Okay.
We can apply for an extension, but that extension typically is like our fiscal year to the end of our
which would be pretty short.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yes. Commissioner Adams, you had something further?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's very unfortunate that the prices have come in the way that they have, because this is a very important project for the health and safety of those communities. And unfortunately, I think it would not be responsible for us to move forward with the prices being so out of whack. for lack of a better word. That being said, I would like to see the drainage stay on the table or move forward, since that is a priority of that Gifford neighborhood plan. And if there's a way to work that out, that would be great. And what do you see happening with the sewer part of it? Do you just plan to put that on the back burner and maybe go out in a couple months and see what comes out, or what's your plan?
Yeah, I mean, we think it's a great project. I don't think we would just scrap it. The plans have been designed. We have the permits in hand. They're good for 5 years. So if we do get funding or if we get better pricing, we can literally hit the ground running. So it's not to say we're going to stop the project, but just to put it into abeyance until we get some better funding.
Good. I would like to see that stay in the hopper, and if something does come up, we can move on it. Thank you.
Vinny, I see you agreeing that, we want to keep this in the hopper, but staff's recommendation is to terminate. Commissioner Zork said table. We're throwing different terms here which have different meanings. And I think everybody's got a concern that, being good stewards, the prices are just inappropriate. But by the same token, we've made a commitment. And where does this place the good folks of East Gifford who are looking forward to this project?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to differentiate when staff's saying terminate, we're terminating the CDBG grant and tabling the project. So this is an opportunity for us to terminate a CDBG grant and not have affirmatively furthering fair housing regulations apply to us on that, but keeping the project active. Also on page 145, you'll see that we are also recommending that we move forward with the East Gifford Drainage Project. That was part of the Gifford Neighborhood Plan. And if you look, we're only looking at using 30,000 of the CDBG dollars for that project, and we had a match of about 185,000 from sales tax. We think we would bring that project back with the sales tax and the MSBU funding, just funding that project in full, and Public Works would bring that back at a later date.
Thank you for clarifying. I think if the general public was listening to this meeting, it was either it's on or off. It wasn't a set of mixed variables, okay? So I just wanted the terms elaborated on. Commissioner Solari.
I'm basically with Commissioner Adams on this. I believe, given not only the costs of the projects, but the different costs of the water storage project and the importance of that project to Gifford, that I would go with tabling the West Wabasso project at this time, but going ahead with the East Gifford Drainage Project.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other question for staff, if it's all right. Vinny, do we have, in your department, since we have the concept of phase one, the sewer design, and then we have the revised where we change the depth, have we ever taken one of our other consultants that are on staff and said, here, give us a 10-hour review on this, or just spend a portion of time and look at the bids and look at how we've designed it, and have we somehow contributed to the current design that was bid? And I know people don't like to come after other people's work to look at it, but and try to, almost like a third set of eyes, to value engineer it and say, look, if you did this, this, and this, you might be able to save some significant dollars. But sometimes when you work on something and you changed it once, you kind of get stuck in that mode, and sometimes a fresh set of eyes just for a limited period, not awarding somebody a full contract, but just hey, can you do a short review on this for us and give us a 2-page set of comments, something really simple, and see if that could, because we are going to do this someday if we can get the cost down or other funding sources. But since the numbers are as squirrely as they are, is there something either in wording, definition, or the scope of how the project was designed that, if done differently, could reduce the cost significantly?
Yeah, that's a great point. We can certainly use one of our continuing consultant agreements for a nominal fee and just negotiate the scope.
And just see if anything, I think it'd be worth checking, because we know we are going to come back and do this at some date, and I'd rather get that figured out earlier on of cost-saving items, so when we do actually do it in the future, we've already gone through that process.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the audience that would want to speak in behalf of this project or the future that it may be taking? What a reserved audience today. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to go ahead and move staff recommendation for option 1, which is to table the sewer project, but moving forward with the stormwater project.
Second.
And I just want to clear that because the recommendation itself in the backup doesn't really say move forward with the stormwater project, so I just want to emphasize that we are moving forward with the stormwater project at this time.
It says staff can move forward.
Well,
so-
yeah, that's the difference between options. The recommendation is on the next page, and that's not included in the actual recommendation.
So is that option 1A?
Yeah, that's one of the options. That's why I just wanted to
That's
make
all
sure.
listed under option 1.
Well, those are different options. The recommendation is on the next page, and that doesn't have that language. So I just wanted to be clear that.
Okay, well, I read the 3 bullet points as subparts of option 1, which is to terminate the CBD grant, terminate the St. John's grant, and move forward with the Gifford water project. All that's under option 1. Option 2 is award the bid, move forward with the whole thing. So to me, option 1 includes those 3 bullet points.
Okay, well, I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't want to go forward with any doubt in anybody's mind. Thank you.
And I'll say, based on the discussion here, staff's clear with the direction to keep the Gifford drainage project moving forward. And we'll come back with that.
Yes, and thank you for that. So we are moving forward. So we have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Adams. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Well, with that, I think that we have covered all of our items. Anything further? Commissioners?
Another record-setting meeting.
This meeting is hereby adjourned.
All right.